that just, just so you watch what you say.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Okay.
I being inappropriate. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and believe me, I've come close. It's been bad. Let's see here. Let me see. I think we have 1 minute left. I want to see how we're doing on Facebook here. Okay. Yep. We're up. We're up and live.
Terrific.
And it is 4 o'clock. So I'm going to start our theme music and start letting people in. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. It is time to go. We have a nice program tonight. And here's our theme song. You'll like this, Ed.
Okay.
Why isn't it playing? Okay. You'll like this, Ed.
Okay.
Hey, good afternoon, to Greatest Generation Live. Oh my gosh, hey, when we have Warren Goss going to be entering this room. That is wonderful. Warren Goss and Rhonda Goss have entered for the first time. Hey, Rhonda. Hey, Warren. Oh my gosh, is it great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Oh, this is terrific. We have a terrific program today. This is Greatest Generation Live on this Sunday, October 18th here. It's a kind of a crisp, beautiful, fall afternoon here in Pittsburgh, but I'm warmed up with the wonderful fire behind me. And my name is Todd DiPastino, and I'm the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and we're a nonprofit that for 12 years has been holding veteran storytelling events where veterans of all eras, all ages, all branches of service come together with the public and share their stories. And at the end of March, we started doing this virtually, and Greatest Generation Live is one of the programs that kind of grew out of our virtual programming. There's just, I think I was personally very surprised to see how many World War II veterans continued to join us virtually on Zoom. Very inspired by that, including several World War II veterans we have with us. Hello, Mary Goss. Good to see you. Your hair looks great. I got to see Warren and Mary and Rhonda recently, and oh, what a thrill it was to actually see a human being face to face for the first time in a while. So we are a Pittsburgh-based nonprofit, and that is relevant because we are up against, at 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, we are up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it is like being a mosquito up against a windshield. But last I checked, the Steelers were up 24 points, so maybe some people will be coming over to our Zoom side and watching on Facebook and YouTube. I know that one viewer from Sweden, Lars McKee, he does not care a whit about football, so that's good. He's not, and neither does Jim. Jim Jameson doesn't care either. So
hey, the Steelers won 38-7.
38-7. Okay, hey. We can put that to bed. That's good. 38-7 against the hated Cleveland Browns. So that's good. That's excellent. I want to let you know before we get started with our guests, wonderful guests. We have Jack Morrow, World War II Marine, and Ed Gitre, who's a professor at Virginia University, who is the director of this fascinating and wonderful project. I wish I had gotten to discover, like he did, the American Soldier in World War II project, and we'll be talking about that first. But first, I do want to remind you that tomorrow night we have our Veterans Breakfast Club happy hour at 7 p.m. I really do encourage you to join us. It is going to be a interesting evening tomorrow because we are focusing on the October missile crisis of 1962. It's the 52nd anniversary of the October missile crisis, and we'll be having veterans who served in the crisis in various capacities kind of share their memories of that tense time, that the closest by my reckoning that we've ever come to, nuclear war here. And so we'll have several veterans kind of share their stories from 1962. And then we're also going to have some veterans who were in Beirut in 1983 when the Marines barracks blew up. 37th anniversary, that happened October 23rd. 1983, and we have a few Marines who were there and who could give us some kind of first-person accounts of what happened. So that is our happy hour tomorrow night at 7. Please do join us. It's at the same Zoom address, same Zoom link as this event. And then on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., we have our virtual breakfast, which is not simulcast on Facebook or YouTube. And there's no real program. We just kind of talk. We just kind of have, share some memories, share some stories, and dig in a little bit to the news. And one of the news items that we dug into was this one that I do want to share with you. This was the biggest World War II bomb found in Poland, was detonated. It sounds like accidentally detonated last week underwater in a canal right in the extreme northwest corner of Poland in this town. I wish Ken Ruzicki was with us because he'd be able to pronounce it. Świnoujście. Świnoujście. Does anybody speak Polish here? Oh, my Polish mother would be so disappointed in me. Świnoujście. Yeah, Świnoujście, something like that. You can see that it's right here. I mean, literally on the German-Poland border. And it was one of these really special, here's another shot of the map. It was found right here, right in this canal, which connects this lagoon, which is part of the Oder River, which separates Germany from Poland and empties out into the Baltic Sea right here. So this is where the bomb was dropped, and it turns out that it was not an ordinary bomb. It was an earthquake bomb. And there was an English, I can't remember his name, an English designer who had theorized that a better way to bomb a building or even ships at sea was to create a bomb that could penetrate the ground and then explode. That if you have a bomb kind of hitting next to a building or into a building and exploding, you're really just kind of destroying the superstructure of the building. If you could penetrate the bound, I mean, this is the diabolical science of warfare. If you could penetrate the ground and have the bomb actually create a mini earthquake, you could bring buildings down completely and ruin the foundations. And it was that kind of diabolical logic that led to the earthquake bomb, 2 earthquake bombs. One was called Tall Boy. That was the little one. That was 12,000 pounds. And here it is falling towards Earth, and it had to be aerodynamic. I mean, it had to penetrate the ground. So it had to reach high velocity before it hit the ground. And so the fins had to be just right. The spin on it had to be just right. And by the time it hit the ground, it was going 750 miles an hour. Very fast for a bomb. And this was the larger version of the Tall Boy. This was a 24,000-pound bomb, another earthquake bomb called a Grand Slam. And you can see it being carried here by, I think it's a Lancaster, specially outfitted Lancaster bomber that must have had very long wheels, right? For this thing to land? Does anybody know? I'm thinking how are you going to land with that thing? How are you going to take off with that thing? Has to have long wheels. Okay, that's what I'm going with. And then here's a variety of bombs, because you'll hear, our veterans will sometimes tell stories, our Vietnam vets or vets of other eras that, we carried 500-pound bombs, we carried 1,000-pound bombs. And I just thought this was a helpful photograph that showed you the differences between the sizes. I mean, they really did vary in size. And we also have a look at the Goss family. Hi, Warren, Mary, and Rhonda. I can't take my eyes off of you guys. Good to see you. Good to see all of you. And I thought before we move on, I would also share just a 1-minute video of this thing exploding. This is European news here. Okay. Oh, and I've got to remember to share my sound. I'm going solo again today. We don't have Sean or Lauren or Ellie with us. I successfully did this last week. They think it was a fluke. So, okay, that's wrong. So I'm here to prove to them that I could do this program solo.
This is a dramatic moment. A World War II bomb found in a shipping channel near the Baltic Sea explodes while being remotely defused by Polish military divers. 750 residents were evacuated for the delicate operation to defuse the 5-ton device. The well-preserved bomb was found last year when dredging was taking place close to a port city in the far northwest of Poland. British designed and nicknamed Torboy, it was also known as an earthquake bomb. It was dropped by the Royal Air Force in an attack on a Nazi warship back in 1945. A yellow marker shows the location in the water. The operation was supposed to take 5 days, as only one diver was able to work on it at a time because of the risks. The Polish Navy used underwater cameras to locate it, and divers were outside of the danger zone when it detonated and no one was injured.
Boy, and they had those intrepid EOD guys, those demolition Navy divers. Oh, I don't know how anybody can do that job, working on that thing. And we, whoa, we definitely, oh, that's me. That's me. I thought it was you. I was blaming you guys. That was me, because that was the next video. See, don't tell Ellie or Sean that that happened, all right? That'll be our little secret. Okay, so yeah, so that's World War II in the news. Those EOD guys, I just cannot imagine. We're going to do a program with some demolition people, those, you know, EOD bomb diffusers. You just have to have nerves of steel or something wrong with you to want to do that job. That's such a stressful job. Let me introduce our guest today, one of our guests today. This is Professor Edward Gitre. Hello, Ed. How are you?
Great to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Todd.
You are reaching us from Virginia Tech University?
Virginia Tech, that's right.
And I know that you have young children, and I know your semester must be just crazy this semester with COVID-19. You're probably doing classes virtually or some in-person hybrid, but it's not normal. It's not a normal semester.
It is definitely not a normal semester.
and so I'm just doubly grateful that you were willing to join us. I sent you an email and said, hey, would you be willing to join us, you know, to join this program that you've never heard of, to talk about this project that I find totally fascinating. And I'm so happy you agreed to do it. And just, you know, with your busy schedule, that you were willing and able to take out a few minutes on a Sunday. This is the American Soldier in World War II project. And Ed, just let me give people a little bit of a background so they'll know what they're going to hear. In World War II, and it sounds like at the end of World War II, the Army Research Branch, which is a research wing, wanted to find out kind of what they did right and what they did wrong in acclimating these civilians into Army life. We hear about this story all the time here at the Veterans Breakfast Club. You know, over the past 12 years, we've heard so many of citizen soldiers, you know, or sailors who enter the military, and basic training is pretty much an indoctrination into this strange subculture. And I think the Army wanted to know, how did they do with morale? How did they do with, you know, acclimating people to Army life? And there was a lot of open-ended questions. They sent this questionnaire to 500,000 soldiers, GIs, around the world, and got back 65,000 pages of handwritten responses. Ed discovered these pages in the National Archive about 10 years ago and did something I think that was so remarkable and so generous. He started a project to get volunteers to transcribe these pages so that history nerds like me, and presumably like you, if you're watching this, you probably a World War II history nerd, can read them on our own. And you can see they're just fascinating. They're very funny. I mean, you know, military people, veterans, I've learned, are extremely funny. Here's some of the responses. Warren, you'll appreciate this. Warren Goss was a D-Day veteran. He'll appreciate this. The damn officers ought to dig their own foxholes. After all, we don't give a damn what happens to them. And then he also added, we need more women. All right. And I love this. I have answered your questions in this book to the best of my knowledge. So I'm now looking for a discharge, and I don't see why I have to be here, essentially, I think is what he's saying. I'm a very little used to the U.S. Army. To hell with Hitler. So it's just, I mean, the gems that you must have discovered, Ed. Can you talk a little bit about your discovering this trove, this treasure trove of documents?
Yeah. So, right, it was back in 2009, and I was at the National Archives. And my background was kind of intellectual cultural history. I knew within intellectual history, deal a lot with the social behavioral sciences in the 20th century, mid-century. And so I knew about this research organization. I knew that they did surveys. And there were references to these handwritten commentaries, but I had no idea what I was going to discover when I went and ordered these, because even if you look in the catalog that they have at the National Archive that relates to these images, it's really nondescript. It follows kind of they refer to surveys, so you know that they're about surveys, and you know the time period, but you have no idea what's inside. So I order up a couple of cartons. It's like 44 microfilm reels. It's a Saturday. I put the first one on the microfilm reel, on the machine. I hate reading microfilm. Historian, and I'm not the only one, because it's just they're often really hard to read, and it's kind of monotonous scrolling through. But within like a couple of minutes of reading these responses, I just knew that I had something really special. And I had a point and shoot camera, and I was taking pictures of this microfilm, the screen on this microfilm reader, because I just wanted to capture what I could in this really short visit. But it stuck in the back of my mind. And a couple of things made it really apparent to me that this was a unique collection. And one, in addition to the size, as you said, there's 65,000 pages that were photographed right after the war. But the soldiers who took these surveys were told that they were completely anonymous and that they should be as honest as they wanted and felt they could be, not to fear what might happen if an officer found out what they had written, or no one was going to know. And then the second thing is that they were uncensored. As everyone here knows, so much of World War II was censored either officially or unofficially. And as I was reading through, I was like, these are definitely not self-censored. And I think one of the things that originally attracted me to these was a couple of surveys that I read. Responses to were from African-American soldiers, and they were talking about their experience being in a segregated army. And they were just really, really powerful. And so I knew, I was like, it's just so unfortunate that these are sitting in the National Archives in these two boxes where there's no copy that I knew of at that point. So you would have to drive to the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, sit in front of a microfilm reader and scroll through these one by one. So it planted a seed back then. But like, if this is a gold mine, and if this could get out into the public could really benefit. Exactly. And so fast forward to 2014, I got to Virginia Tech. There is a community here doing some digital projects. It's obviously a tech school. And I just kind of put two and two together, and I was like, I'm at the right place to do this project. And the project was born. So what I did was early on was I teach a lot of World War II, a lot of cadets, because this is a very large ROTC program. It's the second largest. It's one of two senior military college programs in a state university. And they have to take military history. So I often teach World War II. And I wanted to relate to these students what it was like for individual soldiers to serve in the war in like a really raw way, uncensored way. And so I started having them transcribe these in class, and it was really eye-opening for these students, particularly for the cadets, because they could just really relate to the common everyday gripes that they had about food and clothing and everything. And so we got funding, and the National Endowment for the Humanities has funded the project. And at this point, after 2 years of transcribing all of these pages, we've gotten them all transcribed.
And how many volunteers contributed to this project?
I think at last count, we're around not quite 7,000.
Oh my gosh, 7,000 people.
Yeah, it's about 6,900. And I have to tell you, some of our transcribers have transcribed thousands and thousands of pages. I think one of our top transcribers has transcribed maybe 11,000 pages herself.
Oh.
And the way that it works is we're using what's called a crowdsourcing platform, Zooniverse.org, and each document has been transcribed 4 times, and that is to get the best quality transcription. So they're all compared using an algorithm to pick the one that has the most concurrence, or
Oh my.
And we're on that. We've gone through that process right now, and the goal is to launch the site in the spring.
How
So
wonderful.
it's all going to be available, as well as the survey data that went along with this. Because the way it worked is they would answer a whole battery of multiple choice, some short answer questions, and then there would be this prompt at the very end that was open-ended. So we've got all of that data, and we're putting it all back together as much as we can and making it available to the public.
And I put the link to the project in Zooniverse.org here in the Zoom side in the chat, so that you could go and check out, what has been collected so far. And it's also fascinating to kind of read the chat among the transcribers, and they're kind of talking about documents that they're reading. Hey, check this out. Look what I found. It just seems to be like a kind of a mine where there's a nugget of gold, just about everywhere you reach. And I thought I would share just a few things that I saw online. And this is, here's again, this is an anonymous kind of a free response, handwritten thing from a GI in 1945 or 1946. He writes, the Army asked, like, how could we improve our services? And he says, pick proper men for officers. It was the officers' neglect that caused me to be captured. The major took us on the wrong road, and the company commander left us in the lurch while he pulled out. And he, tells the whole story. I mean, it's not only a whole story it's not just a gripe. It's kind of like a little slice of life of the, examples of good leadership, bad leadership. There's all kinds of stuff here. Let me share another one. I love that. This is my true and honest belief, and I wish I could put my name down. To whom it may concern, and I include this because we're in Pennsylvania, the 28th Division, our Pennsylvania National Guard Division, on a whole, is run not for the soldier, but for the officers. I have no judge, nor am I jealous of them. And then it goes, on and on. There's a lot of griping about officers, and that's just something that I know in World War II from, my work on Bill Malden and his cartoons. And a lot of this was, improved after the war. I'm guessing there's probably a lot of griping about officers in World War II in this collection.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Warren Goss here. I'm going to ask him to unmute. Rhonda, thank you, Rhonda. Hello, Warren. Hi, Warren.
Say hi.
Hello, Todd.
Hey, Warren. If you were given, I want to know, so Ed here, Professor Ed, has collected these great responses from World War II GIs. A lot of them are complaining about, what are the common complaints you get about, Ed? That I know officers, what else?
Yeah, that was the most frequent. I mean, so this research branch was embedded in what became the Information Education Division. And so in being part of the morale services, they asked these surveys covered everything from food to clothing. There's stuff about combat because they were concerned about mental health, hospital care. So you really get the gambit here. Early on, particularly the very first survey. So the first survey was conducted actually the day after Pearl Harbor, and it ran actually past the end of the war. But particularly early on, the gripes, not even like legitimate concerns about leadership and command, were just repeated over and over again. But there were lots about furlough policy, about passes. You had lots of as I said, the officer enlisted, it wasn't just problems with the officers, but it was all just basic relations between officers and enlisted men, and that carried across the war. Right. But they used the responses had to do with education, the courses that they could take or be offered, and a lot of these were these surveys were conducted during the war stateside, but some of them overseas, and not too long after combat. So there's lots of handwritten responses that have to do with combat. But really, I mean, they covered everything. So they didn't photograph every response from every survey. So I don't know about all the choices, but at least 10% are from African-American soldiers talking about their experience. So there's a lot of responses dealing with segregation. There's also another role that got photographed that dealt with wax. And those were really shocking to me to see to read the these really uncensored comments about women in uniform. I mean, I knew about the hostility to women in uniform, but to read the comments of what they thought about the wax and women in uniform was really eye-opening.
It's jarring to read. And I have to say that, you know, what we do here with the Veterans Breakfast Club, you know, we're talking 75 years after the event with some of these veterans. And in Vietnam, same thing, 50 years after the event. It's very different to listen to the voices in the real time, like in 75 years ago, in the moment. There's something raw and, like you said, uncensored. There is a gauze that develops over the decades, and we tend to forget the bad stuff and remember the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and here's one. It's a lot of the bad stuff has to do with racial segregation in World War II. Here's one black soldier saying colored soldiers is not treated with a dam in Louisiana. They don't have no rights and no say so. One of us colored soldiers got on a city bus in Alexandria and the white civilians beat upon them and said, you know, get out of here. Here's another. A black soldier says, has Germany treated the Jews more harshly than the Southern and American cracker treated the American Negro? Of course, the answer is yes, but they never claimed to be a true democracy, and we have. They have me in the army, and there is very little I can do about. But at least please advance some of the more logical and truthful slogan than fighting for democracy. How can one fight for something one knows little or nothing about? Something that is the privilege of the chosen few. Just like these wonderful voices from history in the moment, grappling with, you know, problems that I think we tend not to think about when we think about that era, World War II. Just fantastic. And if you don't mind, Ed, I want to open it up to two Army veterans I know are with us. One is an officer and one was not. Roland, I'm going to ask Roland Glenn, who is a company commander, Battle of Okinawa, World War II. He lives in Maine. Roland, what do you think about this gripes about, I think they're really probably griping about like the privileges that officers get versus enlisted men, the gap. Did you recognize that during the war?
No, I didn't. I had a relatively short time in combat as an officer, and our lives depended upon one another. So I did not pick up any agitation. There was agitation between officers. I experienced that more than between an officer and an enlisted person. And then when we got to Korea, it was an entirely different scene. It was a peace mission rather than a combat mission. And I once again, I did not encounter any real agitation between the officers and the enlisted men.
That's interesting to hear. I mean, because I've certainly understood that, yeah, once you get into combat, certainly that gap, you know, that gap narrows. All of you are at risk. Warren, can I ask you, Warren Goss? Warren landed on Utah Beach on D-Day and ended up serving in the 70th Division afterwards, fought all the way through to Germany. Warren, I'm asking to unmute you here. Thank you, Rhonda. Do you think you were well led in World War II? Were your officers good leaders?
My officers?
Yes.
As long as I wouldn't listen to them, some of them were pretty good.
Do you think they should have listened to you more?
Well, I had one officer there. I used to run some patrols quite a bit. And one night I had 2 patrols. When I got back, turned in what I thought, and he wanted me to take another patrol because he had some questions about a little village or something. And I refused to go. And the argument started, and he couldn't bust me any lower. So he said he'd put me in a dog pen, in the bullpen there. And I said, okay, I'll take the patrol if you go with me. And I'll go. If you don't go, I ain't going. So we never went.
You called his bluff.
And a lot of stuff like that. And then ask you to do something one way and I'd do it another, but I didn't like what they was telling me. And I guess I was a little bit rebellious, and I still am, because I don't even listen to my doctor sometimes.
Do you listen to Mary?
She thinks I do.
Oh, I think you do, Warren. And by the way, I should let people know, Warren and Mary have been married 70 years last month. 70 years. And they're
Yes,
still
sir,
living.
Todd. That's 70 years with her, and I still love her.
Isn't that amazing?
She's
They're living in
my
this
girl.
the same house that they built together by hand 70 years ago. Oh, how wonderful. And Warren is going to be our guest, our spotlight guest here on November 1st, Sunday, November 1st, in 2 weeks. Right, Warren?
I guess. I don't know. I have to do what I'm told.
Mary, he's going to be here November 1st with us. All right.
I'll see to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Oh, this is so great. Ed, are there any other kind of like surprises that you found in this wonderful collection of documents?
Yeah. I think one of the other things that I like about or attracted to me was the humor that came through as well. I mean, so it was painful to read a number of the responses, particularly from the African American soldiers who served, and the prejudice and the racism. But on the flip side, and I think my students who were transcribing, they too really enjoyed the humorous ones. So there was one fairly short response from a soldier who was just so sick of eating Spam. He's like, Spam, Spam, Spam. I dream of Spam. So definitely the humor comes through, and I've been those are some of the ones that I really have enjoyed the most. I think the ones that have really, aside from the ones from African American soldiers, I think the responses that really shocked me were the ones from soldiers who thought that we should have teamed up with Germany. There's plenty of anti-Semitism in some of these responses. Mm-hmm. And we associate so much of the veteran from World War II with the liberation of the camps, and there's a genuine. Those are important moments. So this doesn't take away from that history,
right?
But it's really jarring when you read a response from a soldier who's who really thinks that we made a mistake. We shouldn't have teamed up with the British. That we should have we should have aligned ourselves with Germany. And
we were on the wrong side. That's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. And my students, I think those are the ones that they are just they just don't know what to do with those responses.
How to process that.
How do you process that when you've grown up thinking of that we were that everyone was on the right side? It was just so obvious the Holocaust was evil and that we liberated, and for them to encounter these responses from these soldiers, they just don't know what to do with those. I don't really know what to do with some.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How fascinating! How great! And again, congratulations to you, and thank you for being willing and able to share this with people like me and people on this program. When you kind of make all these digitized documents available, I'll have a blast just kind of dipping into them every once in a while and reading a bunch.
Yeah, 65,000 pages, and these were from soldiers at all different periods of their service, and multiple theaters, because they surveyed across the world. And I mean, for me, historians are going to have a field day working with these because of how extensive they were. But I think it's so important for the generation that's coming up, for my students, to have access to these, because this generation is passing, and there's a myth around the greatest generation. And I just think that what's really important to me about the project is just the humanity that comes through.
Yeah.
The pain, the suffering, the humor, just the full range of experiences. And so for me to be able to provide that to the public is really what drives the project, and all the people who've contributed to it.
I got to tell you, Ed, that you could imagine that, as a Bill Malden scholar, biographer, I love humor, and that's what attracted me to Malden's work.
Yeah.
And then when I started working with veterans, it's like everything they said was like a cartoon caption, like they were just, they're the funniest people I've ever met and ever spent time with in my life. And a Marine told me, a young Marine who served in Iraq, told me that he said, yeah, war is one of the most awful things you could be in, but it also generates more humor than anything that I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. So there was, that reminds me, okay, so soldiers were told not to write their names on these responses, but one soldier did anyway. And I did some digging, and I got connected to a relative. And part of the reason I reached out and tried to find the relative, because it was a short response. I mean, these are only 1 to 2 pages. It was maybe half or 3/4 of a page. But this soldier's personality just came through so loud and clear. And he was funny, he was irreverent. And so when I reached out to the family member, they told me he worked for unions afterwards. And it was basically what they told me about his whole life afterward. You could see in that one page his personality.
It just came through.
It just came through. I do see that there was a question here.
Yes.
I can answer about
Please.
they were used. So these surveys were used to form a lot of policies. So the point system that we used at the end of the war, it was informed by these surveys. The educational opportunities, the GI Bill, all the numbers that were used by Congress to estimate the cost came from surveys. The desegregation that came after the war comes out of the survey program, because one of the things that was really interesting is that with African Americans, why they surveyed them is because they had to deal with this morale issue. But in 1944, they had some kind of de facto desegregation, as many of you know. And what they did was they surveyed the white officers who witnessed the volunteer African American soldiers who served in combat, and it materially changed their attitudes. And they surveyed before and then after combat. And that experience and having that data helped to desegregate the military. And there was a lot of things, everything from the clothing that was issued. I mean, there was just a number of small ways in which the surveys informed policy. And also with officers and training, the surveys did actually have an impact on officer selection. So,
and after the war, there was Congress convened the Doolittle Committee, or the Doolittle Commission, that studied that relationship between officers and enlisted, and came out with a raft of reforms that drastically improved enlisted men's lives in the Army, and has really influenced kind of that relationship ever since. And I imagine that came out of this survey too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really surprised, they didn't realize going in, or it wasn't until they did the first survey did they realize how well educated these soldiers were. and even the African-American soldiers. So there were lots of assumptions about the educational level, but it was only, they worked with the Census Bureau after conducting that first survey, and they realized that there was a marked improvement in education. And that just had a cascading effect where they realized that they had to treat them differently as citizen soldiers. And so that rhetoric that we call propaganda around the citizen soldier, they had to take seriously, because it was really evident that this was really undermining morale, the officer enlisted men relations, and also just the fact that you had educated soldiers coming in saying, you've got to run this like a modern organization, otherwise we're going to lose the war. You got to get your act together. This whole old caste system is not going to work.
Exactly.
So they were asking for more exams and what we think of meritocracy.
Isn't that interesting? Does anybody here on the Zoom side or on the Facebook side, if you have a question for Ed, please do speak now. Okay, Roland.
Ed, tell us again how this originated. Not your role in it, but how did the massive number of veterans get contacted originally?
Yeah. So at early on, before Pearl Harbor, and earlier in 1941, there was a proposal from Elmer Roper, that the Roper polling outfit. He had suggested doing polling of soldiers, and when Secretary of War rather, Stimson found out about this plan, he nixed it. He's like, there's no polling. You're not going to. This is so he banned polling. And what happened was that Frederick Osborne, who was one of those $1-a-year men, knew the Roosevelt family really well, was a masterful diplomat. And he was a philanthropist who had invested in the social sciences before the war. So he very quietly kind of positioned himself to create this branch. So the first survey, like I said, was in 1941, right after Pearl Harbor, and they just kind of worked their way into the organization and told officers, we are going to provide intelligence for you. We're not going to broadcast. We're not going to tell the public what we find in these surveys. And it didn't take very long for them to find a willing client, as it were. So what would happen is that once they got authorization, they would create what we call cross-sectional surveys. So they would pick, say, every 10th man by using the records from from headquarters, and so the soldiers would be sent to a theater and not told necessarily what they were going to be doing there. They'd sit down and then they'd be given the spiel. So they didn't have a choice of whether or not that they were going to be there. And that's basically how they ran these surveys. And there were a couple hundred that they conducted across the war. Sometimes they would have over 10,000 soldiers who participated in an individual survey. So some of them were quite large.
Just what an amazing treasure trove. Any other questions out there? All right. Ed, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experience and your time with us. Again, I know you have a young family. You're one of those poor people with a job, and so you're a busy person in the middle of the semester here. This is right around midterm. Thank you for joining us.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for this opportunity. Anytime I get an opportunity to talk about the project, obviously you can tell I could talk a lot about it.
Yeah. I mean, we're just scratching the surface, and I will ask. You think that everything will be released, all the digitized documents should be released next spring? Is that the target date?
Yeah, in the spring. I'm hoping by VE Day, which would be the third year after we started the project on Zooniverse. But sometime in the spring, the site will be ready. We're in the design phase right now, so it will happen.
Well, we will look forward to the release of that, and you'd be welcome to come back on anytime you'd want to join us, and you can stay on if you'd like to join us, Ed. Thank you very much. Ed Gitre, Professor Ed Gitre at Virginia Tech University. Absolutely, Carol. Yes, he deserves that round of applause. And Ben Wright asked, did Jack would have been Marine Corps. Marine Corps didn't do that, right? They didn't survey their Marines. They don't care what the Marines think.
That's a really good question. It was mainly with the Army. I know that there were some with the surveying with the Navy, but and what was intact is all from the Army.
Okay. And Roland and Warren, were you ever surveyed? Do you remember?
No, I was not.
You were not.
Oh, man.
All right. Boy, you would have had a lot to say. They would. Your pen would run out of ink. How about you, Warren? I'm going to unmute you. You weren't surveyed.
No, I was never surveyed.
No, they don't care what you think.
They just give me a map and tell me, go look and see what's around this town so we know what to do to it. So take it. And I'd be in that town for 2 or 3 days to be able to determine lines.
Once again, you better tune in on November 1st because Warren is going to be the guest, and man, is this going to be fun. I'm so looking forward to that. That is going to be a blast. But I want to introduce our guest for today, and that is Jack Morrow, who's a Marine who was from Kittanning, Pennsylvania, and he served in the.
That's my buddy, Mary.
Who's that?
Yeah, you know him.
Uh-huh.
You know him,
that's
Warren.
my buddy right there, Jack. I call him on the phone once in a while. He straightens me out. When I got a question, I ask Jack.
Hello, buddy.
How you doing, Jack?
And you too, Mary. Good seeing you again.
Hi.
I think we all need a Marine in our lives to straighten us out every once in a while. I think, and I'm glad that you play that role in Warren's life, Jack.
Yeah, Jack, our grandson was a Marine.
Good for you.
That's right. That's right. Jack was in the 5th Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion. He served in Okinawa. He's from Kittanning, PA, and he joined the Marine Corps before he was 18. He was 17 years old. You had to get your parents' permission. Jack, just recently I learned from you that you didn't intend to actually join the Marines at all. You intended to join the Navy.
Well, actually, my brother at the time was at the Naval Academy. And when I went down to go into the service, I had the intention of joining the Navy. But their office was upstairs. And to get there at the old post office building, I had to go past the Marine Corps enlistment
You turn it up.
place.
I don't know how to turn
And I
it
never
up.
got any further. So there you go.
So they grabbed you before you could get to the Navy.
Well, I just stuck my head in the door just to see what's going on, never got out.
That was your mistake, Jack. That was your mistake. And I'm going to share a picture of Jack Morrow. When was this taken, Jack?
And that was after I came back overseas, probably in San Diego in 46 rather, I'm sorry. And, that was about it. Yeah.
So you did, even though that you intended maybe to go and join the Navy first, you wanted to join, and you're 17 years old, you're young. I want to get a sense of what kind of a kid you were. But first I want to ask you, do you remember December 7th, 1941? You were probably 15 years old or so.
Oh, yes. We're downtown in Kittanning, just a group of guys standing around, and we heard the news of what happened, and everything got very, very quiet. And all of us sort of disappeared and went home to hear more about what was going on. And that was about it.
Did you think at age 15 that you'd be drawn into this conflict?
I presumed that somewhere along the line I probably would be. It was just a matter of time until it was going to occur.
I mean, it seems like you were pretty eager to get in on it at age 17.
Well, like everybody else that age, I wanted to get the tip of the spear. I never got there, but
yeah,
I was there.
What did your parents think of you joining the Marines at age 17?
Well, they were absolutely aghast when I came back home and said I joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah, I could imagine they were.
They figured, well, they've got to sign for me anymore. This is what he wants. This is what he gets.
So they have one child in the Naval Academy, one child in the Marine Corps. Both of them eventually would be going off to war. Your parents, your poor parents.
Well, that was just the two of us, the only boys we had in our family, no girls. And of course, I met up with my brother overseas at Okinawa when his ship pulled in there.
Oh, that's
This
so
was
great.
after the war was over. But it was a nice, just a real nice meeting with him at that time.
Oh, that must have been fantastic. I can't imagine
He's
that.
still living. He lives down Hilton Head, South Carolina now.
Does he really? What's his name? What's his first name?
That's Arthur Morrow. You've met him. He was
Arthur.
at our meetings on the North Hills.
Yes, absolutely. Hold it. Is this Arthur right here with us? Arthur, I'm going to ask to unmute. This is you. You're Jack's brother. You have to unmute yourself, Arthur. And we will wait because this is going to be interesting.
There.
Hey, Arthur. How are
Yes,
you?
I'm fine.
Why in the world would you let your younger brother join the Marine Corps?
Hey, I had nothing to do with it. He was already in when I found out.
Well, he called me a mad, impetuous youth at the time.
Well, you gotta keep in mind that the Marine Corps is part of the Navy.
I thought it was the other way around.
No, not the other way around.
Hi, Art. It's good seeing you again.
Yeah, good seeing you too. You're looking good.
Apparently, you got my message yesterday.
I did indeed.
Super.
And I love the way that Art is not letting you forget that he was in the Navy. So, Art, when did you go into the Naval Academy, Art?
August of 1942.
Oh, boy. Okay. Were you one of the classes that was kind of rushed through, graduated early?
Yes,
Okay.
we graduated in June of 1945.
Okay.
So we were a 3-year course.
And then they try and rush you into the war, I guess, as quickly as they could to the Pacific.
Well, right after graduation, they sent me down to Naval Air Station in Jacksonville, Florida, for aviation orientation. And that was a 30-day assignment. So basically, by the time I caught up with my first ship, which was a Fletcher-class destroyer, I caught up with it in Tokyo Bay about a week or so after the surrender ceremony on the USS Missouri.
Can I ask you, and I'm just so curious, you were so young and Jack was so young. Were you disappointed in that? Were you disappointed that, you didn't get in on the fight?
I was definitely disappointed. I figured if they hadn't have sent me down to Jacksonville for aviation orientation, then I would have been out there.
Oh, how interesting. So you ended up, and I'm sorry, I want to get back to Jack, but I just, it's great to have you here. Do you have an email, Art, that I could contact you with?
Yeah, Art Morrow.
Okay.
46
Okay.
at gmail.com.
Great.
46 was my class at the academy.
That was your class, but they rushed you out in 45.
Yes.
Oh, and then how long did you spend in the Navy?
I resigned my commission in 1954 after the Korean War.
After the Korean War. What was your service during the Korean War?
The USS Toledo.
Okay.
Heavy cruiser.
Okay.
We were the lead bombardment ship for the Incheon invasion.
Oh, boy. We're doing a special program on the Korean War because we're in the 70th, as you know, anniversary of the Korean War this year, and the Incheon invasion, in September, and then you have the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir in November and December. So next month we're going to be doing a program on the Korean War. I'd love to have you come and have you share some of your memories.
Well, the Navy didn't really have it that bad.
You don't have to have it bad to be on our program, Art.
The Marines and the Army, they took a beating.
Yeah, they sure did.
The Navy pretty much escaped. Not the Navy really took it bad in, of course, World War II, as you know.
Yeah.
But we had no real significant casualties in the Navy.
And the Navy really took it bad in the Battle of Okinawa, which is where you met Jack. Could you? And we'll get there. I'm going to bring you back up to kind of spotlight and talk about how the two of you got together and what that was like. But I want to get back to Jack and boot camp. So boot camp was tough, right, Jack?
But I'm going to be signing off here shortly.
Oh, no. Okay, then we'll get to this now. I want to have you, why don't you guys tell me your version of how you met up with Jack in Okinawa?
Oh, that was interesting. I went to my commanding officer and asked if I could go ashore. I have my Marine Corps brother there. And he said, oh, by all means. And he said, you can use my Jeep. Just tell the harbor master that I told you you can use my Jeep. So I used the Jeep and I went touring around. The Army had signs for all of their units, but the Marine Corps didn't have one. And I stopped and talked to an Army directing traffic on one of the highways there, the roads. He never heard of the Marine unit. So I headed back, figured I missed out. So there was two guys that were hitchhiking. I picked them up and I learned that they were in the Marine Corps. So I asked them if they knew this unit. I said, yes, we're in it. I says, well, take me there. My brother's in that unit. You wouldn't have believed the look on my brother's face when I stepped into his tent.
I can imagine what a reunion that must have been.
Okay, now enough about me. You get back over to Jack.
All right, enough about you. We'll get you later. Back to Jack now. All right. So Jack, boot camp. What was that like? Did you regret ever joining the Marine Corps when you were in boot camp?
Well, everybody that arrives at camp on those trucks from the airport at Yamasee, out on the train station at Yamasee, always hears that thing, you'll be sorry. That's the sing song at Paris Island. It was very interesting. Of course, I was scared to death, not knowing what devil I was getting myself into. But well, here I am, and okay, just live with it. That's what I've asked for, and here I am.
And you got through it, and then you did training. You specifically asked to be trained in radio or radar, right?
Well, they had you make a request of what anything special you wanted to serve in, and I said radio or radar. It's a darn thing they gave me radar because I never could get the Morse code figured out.
And radar was still pretty new.
Very new, yes.
Yeah, and still like constantly being improved like every month or so, it seemed. And then again, I'm going to share your photo again. This is Jack after the war in the Marine Corps. But this was the kind of radar I think you were trained on initially, right?
That sure looks familiar, yes.
That looks familiar. And I bet it was complicated.
Well, to anybody with my tender youth, yes, it was complicated.
And your job, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you repeat yourself? What'd you say?
What the devil is this?
Yeah, what the devil is this? I mean, and this thing was meant to track airplanes, enemy airplanes, and then you were supposed to be able to communicate with a gun battery about the location of the plane?
Well, we didn't communicate with the gun battery, but with the searchlights.
Okay. And so there was literally another searchlight company out there, or
Yeah,
Searchlight?
a Searchlight company of the 5th Anti-Aircraft Artillery.
Okay. And there's another shot of the SCR 268, which was a rather kind of primitive kind of radar. So you get trained in that, and then you get shipped to Hawaii.
Well, I was, went by through the canal from Norfolk to North Virginia, through the canal over to Hawaii in a provisional company till we could fill in to where they needed us.
Right.
And then I was transferred over to Kauai to join my unit and had further training over there.
So it was in Hawaii that you were sent to a replacement depot, correct?
Yes, replacement depot. Yes.
And the replacement system was something I think unique to World War II, and the Army had it also, the Marines had it also. The casualties were so high that units had to continually have replacements come into them. And so you would go to a replacement depot, and the nickname in World War II was Repel Depot. You'd go to the Repel Depot, pretty much wait for your number to be called, and who knows where they were going to send you.
Well, curiously enough, when I was there, the Marine Corps doesn't like to see any Marines sitting around doing nothing. So they put me in work detail, and I had a minor accident. I guess it's minor now, yes, where I was knocked off balance in a supply depot, and I sat on my foot. My problem is my toes were pointing the opposite direction.
Oh. And
I had a bad sprain, so I'm running around on crutches. And I'm just about this time the survivors were coming back from Saipan. And everybody put 2 and 2 together, figure, oh, here's a guy in crutches, he must be back from Saipan. And so when I went to the mess hall to get lunch or dinner, I'm on my crutches and automatically grab a hold of me and bring me in and puts me down at the table, start serving my dish, figuring out as a invalid from there. My mother told me, don't be stupid. So I never told anybody anything different, so I'm going to ride the waves on this one.
You took it while you could.
Hey, you take it when you got it.
You take it when you can. But one question, it's a funny story, but I could also imagine you're at this point 18 years old, I guess, seeing wounded Marines now for the first time.
Yes.
That must have been a bracing.
Yes. Yeah. It's now you realize it is war.
It's war. It's real. It's real.
I've got a statement for Julia. Is she still around?
Julia is still around. Let's see. She turned off her camera, but we could ask her to unmute and she'll join us whenever she can. What question do you have, Jack?
Well, now, my brother Art, as you still have him up there, he had friends from Great Britain. The name of Proudfoot. It turned out he was a prisoner of war at the Bridge on the River Kwai area. And his wife worked at Bletchley Park in Great Britain on their code breaking. Very interesting thing. I knew Julia would be interested because she was in code breaking too.
Yes, she was in code breaking in Washington, D.C., and Bletchley Park was their kind of counterpart.
Oh, yes.
That's interesting. Well, Julia, do you have anything to say? Hey, Julia, how are you?
Maybe she signed off and missed it.
Nope, she's here. She's with us. Hi, Julia. Maybe she can't hear us for some reason. Hi, Julia. Well, we'll continue on. Jack, you then head off you get assigned to your 5th Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion and to a Searchlight company, and you get sent, you don't know where you're going, right? You get sent in a ship to the South Pacific.
Well, no, I took a little trip from Kauai, over to Kauai from Oahu for further training. Then we all got on board ship to go to Okinawa.
Okay.
And we had one stopover on the way over. I can't remember it was Yap or Kwajalein.
It was Yap.
That was
It was Yap. It was Ulithi.
okay. Okay. And we had the shore leave there, just go ashore. And somehow I lost my picture. But am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on. No, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm
Okay.
sharing a picture here. And
Okay. And then we went over to Okinawa. And of course, I wasn't there in the first group of April, on the April Fool's Day in April. I did arrive there to the end of April or early part of May. So I was never there for the initial landings.
I thought I'd pause at a strange place in your story, Jack, just because I know that you stopped in Ulithi. And I just think that some of our, viewers and listeners might be interested in Ulithi. It's one of the most interesting little side stories of World War II. It's one that very few people know about. I can imagine your eyes must have just been, goggle-eyed when you arrived at Ulithi, because Ulithi was nothing more than a string of tiny, tiny, tiny atolls, in the South Pacific. I mean, it was like under 2 square miles if you put all those little islands together, just tiny, tiny, tiny. And yet it had this deep lagoon. I think I have a picture. Yeah, you can see that the shape of the islands here.
Oh, yeah.
Is this horseshoe shape, and within it was this lagoon that was deep water and huge and perfect for anchoring hundreds and hundreds of ships. I think at its peak, the Navy had maybe over 700 ships at Ulithi at one time. And so the Navy built a floating port. There's hardly any land. I think there were 400 people living on these islands when the Navy, took them over. Built a secret floating port. And so when you were there, Jack, there were probably hundreds of other ships there being repaired. Yeah. And I don't know, here's a good picture of some ships around Ulithi. It was a staging area for further activity in the Pacific, certainly for the end of the war. They proposed attacks on Japan. And you could just see they come from everywhere, hundreds of them. There are tens of thousands of sailors and Marines. A lot of these, they created these floating ports so that they could actually repair big ships like cruisers without having any land around. They would lash these ships together. Apparently it was a good R&R place. I'm sure that they never let Marines do this kind of stuff, right? No. You didn't have. You can see this great sign. This is, again, Ulithi. I mean, it is Pittsburgh International Airport is twice as big as all of Ulithi, just to give you a sense of how tiny it is. And you can see there's, enlisted men area, beer garden, baseball fields, bathing beach. You didn't get to go to shore, Ulithi, Jack?
Yes, we did go ashore, just a little shore leave.
Didn't have any fun there?
Well, it was anything off the ship was rather interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. At least the ground didn't move on you.
Right. And so from Ulithi then you went to Okinawa.
Yes.
And what was that like?
Well, it was being in the harbor, helping to unload the ship with our material that we needed for our work. A kamikaze came in and hit the USS Birmingham and damaged it, and it had to be taken elsewhere to be repaired. But that brought me up to the fact, hey, they were shooting people out here.
Yeah. Another dose of reality.
Yes.
Another dose of reality. And that was the USS Birmingham. Here's some of the damage that it did to that ship. And you witnessed it. You witnessed a kamikaze attack.
Yes, I saw that happen, yes.
Oh.
I never had that vindicated till several good number of years ago, till maybe within the last two. Some author wrote about the subject that the Birmingham was hit. And I said, yes, now I know that was the Birmingham. I'd
Yeah.
heard about it that time, but I never heard anything more. But now
Yeah.
I hear it vindicated that that was the ship that was hit.
And Okinawa was absolutely brutal, and you missed the most brutal parts of it. And Roland Glenn, he was a combat commander at Okinawa. He saw the most brutal parts of that battle. But you missed it because you came D+30. You came at the end of April.
Yeah.
I think the invasion was April 1st, Easter Sunday,
Yeah.
I think, and then you arrived at the end of April, early May.
Yes.
So you missed the worst of that battle.
Absolutely. Yes.
But one of the unusual things about that battle was the Navy really suffered. I think 5,000 U.S. sailors, 5,000 were killed in kamikaze attacks
Yes.
in that one battle. And there were hundreds and hundreds of kamikaze attacks. There would be these great waves of hundreds of kamikaze pilots, coming, swarming towards American ships. And I just can't imagine how terrifying that was.
Well, the most significant thing about Okinawa, I think it was the only battle where the commanding general of both sides did not survive.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Who was the American general who was killed at Okinawa? Roland will know. John Ferguson?
Buckner. General Buckner.
Buckner. Right. General Buckner was killed at Okinawa.
And the Marine Corps general took over the command because it was an Army Marine Corps battle. And he took over until Vinegar Joe Stilwell
Yes.
replaced Buckner.
Yes. Man, you guys are smart. We have such a smart group of people. So you see a kamikaze attack, and that's a terrifying thing to see, I can imagine. And by the way, my goal for Greatest Generation Live is to get a kamikaze pilot that Nick DeVoe knows, who was a kamikaze pilot in World War II, and he survived. And he's still alive, and he's in Japan, and Nick has talked with him, and boy, would I love to have him on. Boy, would that be fascinating.
He
has a fascinating story to tell. But anyhow, so your job then, Jack, became defending this airfield, the Kadena airfield.
That is correct.
And you did it with your new radar system.
Yep.
And what did you say that radar was called? Mark 10 or Mark 12, something like
Mark
that?
10 or Mark 12. I can't remember exactly the name. Yeah.
And what was your day-to-day life like?
Oh, well, humdrum. I mean, get up, have breakfast, do routine work around, whatever was required by the sergeant. Incidentally, you had this article on before about Mr. Gitre, about the officers and so forth. There were good officers, there were bad officers. There were good NCOs, there were bad NCOs. It just does not say anything about young officers.
Right.
They were still training too, just like you were.
Right. Yes. Right. And so I'll ask you what I asked your brother. Did you feel like you had missed out on the action, in a sense, that the worst parts of the battle were over? Did you wish at the time, as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid, that you had gotten in on the action? Can you hear me, Jack?
I can hear you. I thought you were talking to my brother.
No, I asked your brother the same question. He said yes, that he did feel like he missed the action. Did you feel the same way?
Well, this is what I asked for. This is what I got.
Okay.
I didn't realize I was going to be that far behind the lines, but that's the way it worked out.
You sound a little disappointed in that. I would think.
Well,
here's what I'm trying to figure out, Jack. I'm trying to figure out.
We all want to be heroes at some time in our life. That was my opportunity, and I missed it.
On the other side, you survived.
Yes, I did that. Yes.
Boy, is that interesting to me. Yeah, that is fascinating to me. Somebody asked, Ben Wright. Why don't you unmute yourself here, Ben?
I was just in chat telling Jack, thank you for protecting Kadena. I flew a lot of sorties in and out of there 30 years later.
Oh, really?
And doing that. Yeah, it's still an active air base.
Oh, yeah.
And there were, it was a, very important and still to this day, very crucial place in the Pacific.
Yeah, here it is. Here's what it looks like today. Didn't look like then when you were there, Jack.
I know. Not that good.
Well, see, the Air Force came in and they made it first class. You know how that works.
Well, curiosity has to play a part in this too. My brother, not my brother, but my son was in the Seabees, and he was on Okinawa in the mid-70s. And would you note, my grandson, Alex, in the Marine Corps, was stationed there in 2011.
Oh my.
So,
would you have?
So we told him he's walking on hallowed ground.
Would you have any desire to go back to Okinawa just to see what it's like? Nah. Okay. Yeah. Who needs it? Yeah. The Air Force comes, they build a golf course there, and it's just, they make it a nice place, right?
It's a beautiful place. Yeah, it's a beautiful place. There was a recent news story, though, that the Marines, the battalion landing teams and Operation Futima Air Base with the Marines is moving to Guam. The Japanese government has been, because of various conflicts, been wanting to move the Marines. I don't know if that's going to affect the Air Force or not, but that's been officially announced that those Marine units are moving to Guam.
Are moving to Guam. Yes, I did read something about that. I did. I have to ask you, Jack, I ran across this little, how I am with trivia, especially with 40 celebrity trivia. I saw that Danny Kaye was there at Okinawa when you were there. Did you see him?
No, I did not.
You did not attend this event?
I did not see any USO units when I was there.
That's too bad.
The only one I saw was one in Hawaii.
Okay, well, this is what you missed out on.
Yes.
Can you tell us about VJ Day? You were there, in Okinawa for VJ Day. What was that like?
Very exciting. Yes. Oh, it's over. Wonderful.
I think I have some pictures of that too in Okinawa. Let me see. Yep, this says August 10th, VJ Day, Okinawa.
Yes.
That must have been when the word came that the Japanese were going to surrender.
Yes. Yes, I think the negotiations will be taken about the 15th of August over in Japan.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And then here's a picture of some guys celebrating on Okinawa. You're not in this picture anywhere, Jack? No?
No.
Okay. Yeah, probably Seabees. They get the good stuff, right? And then that's when you saw Art. You met Art.
Yes. This was after we were brought back from the field and we were sitting in a provisional place in order to be reassigned.
And so you end up, I guess your unit ends up going, leaving Okinawa, but you stay behind because
I had to stay behind because I was 2 weeks short of joining that unit to go back home with it. And I was there 6 more months.
6 more months on Okinawa.
Yeah.
Was that agonizing or not so bad?
Well, I was doing guard duty, 8 off, 4 on and 8 off, 4 on, 8 off. And I heard a rumor that needed somebody in headquarters company could type. So I had typing in high school, and I said, gosh, yes. So I applied for it and got it. So I spent the rest of the time over there in headquarters company typing out grid reports and so forth.
So that's
It
so that was
sure- It sure beat being on guard duty all the time.
and so when did you finally get home?
And it was probably, well, have an opportunity to go to Shanghai on an R&R trip for about a week. And I come back, and then my numbers came up. I had 42 numbers, 40 points.
Right.
And it was probably in April when I got that information that I came back home. But unhappily, on the way home, the ship broke down, and we had to be towed into Tokyo Harbor. And so we had 2 days there in Tokyo Harbor with a little R&R there to deal with the place. So we got on a naval ship that brought us back home. And we get clear across the Pacific Ocean, and we getting over to San Diego when somebody come down with typhus aboard ship, which is a very infectious disease. So there we are, after all this time, 22 months overseas. Now I'm sitting in the damn harbor at San Diego and can't get off the ship because somebody got typhus.
You can't get off the ship. Oh,
I figured my numbers weren't coming up right.
right. Well, what about you were in Tokyo for 2 days? What was Tokyo like in 1946?
It was a mess.
Oh boy.
It was, it's just all the stuff was just scraped aside to give you room to walk through the streets.
Oh boy. So it's still a complete mess.
Oh my. Gosh, this was, only 6 months after the war was over or so or more.
Right.
And, yeah, it was still not taking care of you in the process.
So when you finally were able to get onto American shores after the long ordeal coming home, what was it like to get back home to Katanning finally?
Wonderful. Wonderful. I got shipped from San Diego to Great Lakes Naval Station to be separated from the service. And I hitchhiked back from Chicago over to Pittsburgh because it wasn't going to spend that money paying for a train ticket. So I hitchhiked with another fellow, John Mayhew, from Altoona, and got into Pittsburgh. And my uncle had an office in downtown Pittsburgh, an optometrist, which I became later on in life. And I stopped in there, and we called my parents from there, and they came down that evening. And when we went home that night, getting out of the car, my mother was in such a hurry to get in the house. She slammed the door. It was on my fingers in the door here. So that was my injury of the war. I got my finger slammed in the door getting home.
Ed Gitre was talking about that the Army surveys about it was tough to turn civilian citizens into soldiers and sailors and Marines, but it's also tough to turn them back into civilians. Was that tough for you at all, that transition back to civilian life?
I would say no. I think I made the transition rather easily. I was ready for it. I wanted to get on with the rest of my life. And I used my Bill of Rights to become an optometrist of my life because my uncle was such a very important part of my life. That my professional life, I've been retired for 30 years now from being an optometrist up here in Allegheny and Beaver County.
And that was on the GI Bill.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that great? How wonderful.
The school was down in Philadelphia. At that time, there was only 4 schools in the entire United States teaching optometry.
Yeah, my cousin went to that same school in Philadelphia. I remember. Yeah.
All right.
Yes, he did. Phil Bear. Yeah, and ended up retiring from the VA.
For heaven's sake.
Yeah. Yes. Boy, yeah. And he loved working at the VA because he got to do what I do, talk to veterans all the time and ask them their stories. It's just terrific. Does anybody have questions for Jack and his World War II service? If you do, please do feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. And I will check out on Facebook if people have questions there. But please do to speak up. I do want to let you know next week, Greatest Generation Live, it looks like we're getting Bob Buckler in to share his story. And man, this is quite a story. He is quite a character, Bob Buckler. He was a tail gunner on a B-17, and his plane ditched in Sweden, and he spent 10 glorious months in Sweden during 1943 and 1944, living at a resort in Sweden, for being held there with his crew. And boy, does he have the stories about the dates he went on. He met the king, the food that he ate. And we also have Lars McKee is going to join us. Hopefully Lars is probably watching today. And Lars has done some research on the plane that ditched, the WWII that ditched in Sweden. And he could tell us a little bit. Lars is in the Swedish Army, and he's a World War II enthusiast. And going to get him on Greatest Generation Live to kind of talk with Bob about his time in Sweden. So this will be a fun story that you will remember. That was Bob's first ship, the Glory Girl, and then this is the one, the WWII, which ditched in Sweden, and then later became. Here's a little fact that Lars taught me. This plane that we're going to talk about next week, that Bob Buckler was on, tail gunner, ditched in Sweden. The Swedish kept that airplane. They transformed it, if you could believe it, into a passenger plane because they pretty much had no airlines or no Air Force at that time. This plane was the first Swedish plane to fly across the Atlantic Ocean as a passenger plane, Stockholm to New York City in the 1950s. I love that story. So Lars is going to come and give us some of that history. Bob's going to come and give us his story. So I look forward to that. But again, if anybody has any questions, they could shoot away. If not, let me just...
This is to Warren and Mary. Nice seeing you, Warren. I'm looking forward to getting back to Senior Men's Club soon.
Is he talking to you?
Yeah, I know you're looking forward to that, Jack, because you always tell me when to get up there and take care of what I'm supposed to do. And I jump right away for you. You're a Marine and I ain't.
Well, Jack, then I'm going to have you call Warren on November 1st to remind him that he has to be on this show.
Okay.
All right.
Well, that's true. He better do that.
Yes, exactly.
I'd like to make that a vacancy.
Bob, thank you for this opportunity. I do appreciate it.
Oh, Jack, I so appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I so appreciate all of you kind of coming. Ed, thank you again for coming on Greatest Generation Live. This is so much fun. This is so wonderful. I hope to see some of you at least tomorrow night at 7 p.m. when we talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Beirut Crisis of 1983. And then, of course, our virtual breakfast Wednesday at 9 a.m. Thank you all for joining us.
I've seen this guy at meetings.
Yes. Bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
See you, Warren and Mary. All right. Take care.
Bye.
See y'all.
Yeah.
Bye.